So for task 7, our boss wants us to create 2 new tables in the new AP database. One will be called persons and the other one is going to be called orders. The primary key for persons is going to be ID, and the age column needs to have a constraint of 18 or older. The order table is going to have a primary key of order ID, and then to connect order and persons, we are going to add a foreign key constraint and add the person ID to our order table. And when we add the age constraint and the foreign key constraint, we are going to give them names because that will allow us to remove them or change them in the future. So naming your constraints gives you some flexibility. So I'm going to go ahead and key in the commands to create both tables, and I'm going to pause this video while I do that. So I've gone ahead and keyed in task number 7, commented that out, and I've indicated that we are going to use the new AP database. We're going to create a table called persons. ID is integer and not null, and we put the primary key constraint at the bottom below the columns. For last name and first name, they are variable character. Last name is required, okay, not null. First name is not required. And then we've got age, which is an integer, and that is not required either. So we've added a primary key constraint for ID, and then we have another constraint. And this type of constraint, when you use the keyword constraint, can be added to any of your columns. So the keyword is constraint. We are naming this constraint check age. And then we're using the check keyword to make sure the age is greater than or equal to 18. If we decide to change this in the future, we will be able to access it using the constraint name. Our second table is called orders, and we have order ID, which is required, it can't be null. We have order number, which is also required, and we have person ID. We've indicated order ID is our primary key, and then we're adding a constraint. And this is going to be a foreign key constraint, and you have to have foreign keys in your tables in order to connect them. And if you connect them, you can share data. So we have the keyword constraint. We're naming it FK person order because we are going to be using this foreign key to connect the person and order table. And then FK is just kind of a naming convention for foreign keys, just like CHK is a naming convention for check constraints. So we've got our name, FK person order. This is a foreign key constraint, so we have to use the foreign key keyword. And in this table, the foreign key is person ID. Okay, that's why we have person ID in parentheses. Then we have to use the keyword references, and we have to tell it the table that we are connecting to and the column. So we are connecting to the person's table and the ID column. And you'll notice that we have integer there for the data type, and we also have integer here because they have to match. So basically, when we add people to our persons table, once we have the ID for the person, we can start adding the orders. And this foreign key constraint is going to ensure that we can't add an order for somebody who does not exist in our person table. Okay, so they have to exist in our person table before we can add orders. And that is one of the things that a foreign key ensures. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and run this. And then I'm going to move my closing comment down. And I'm also going to resize that. So the next thing our boss would like us to do is in our test AP database, they would like us to connect the customer and rep tables. And you'll notice our customer table has an ID for a key, but our rep table does not. And if you remember, we created this table by copying data from another database and another table. And when you do that, it doesn't copy the keys. So to add a key to reps, we are going to alter the table. And we're going to tell it that we're going to use test AP. And then we're going to do alter table reps. And we're going to be adding a constraint. Helps if you spell it right. And this is a primary key constraint, so we're starting it with PK. And employee ID is going to end up being our key, so we are naming it PK _ employee ID. Got to tell it the type of constraint, so this is a primary key constraint. And the column we are applying the key to, or making a key, is employee ID. Now the advantage of creating a primary key this way, rather than doing it when you create the table, is that we can give the primary key a name. And if we give the primary key a name, if we change our mind and we don't want it to be the primary key, we can simply remove it by dropping the name. If you create a primary key like this without giving it a name, the only way you can change the primary key would be to drop the table and recreate it. Okay, so there are distinct advantages when you name your constraints. So I'm going to go ahead and run this. I'll try it again. All right, so if you get the weird error I got where it's looking for a stored procedure, which is just kind of crazy, run it again because it should work. And then if you refresh your reps table and display the columns, you should see that it is in fact a key. So at this point, I have primary keys in reps and I have a primary key in customers. And what I need to do is connect these tables. So what you typically do is place the primary key from one table into the other table. And it becomes what's called a foreign key. And that is how you create one-to-many relationships, and that is how you connect your tables. So what we're going to be doing is connecting customers and reps. And we're going to be adding the rep ID to our customer table as a foreign key. So I don't need to tell it to use test AP because it already is. So I can simply say alter table customers. And what I want to do is add rep ID, which is an integer, as a constraint. And I'm going to call it foreign key _ rep. And now I have to give the foreign key keyword and tell it my foreign key is rep ID. and it references reps employee ID. All right, so add rep ID integer. That is adding a new column to customers. Okay, right after that, I am entering the constraint. Now, could you do this on 2 rows? Yeah, you could if it makes more sense. Okay, so totally up to you. But I'm adding my constraint, which is a foreign key constraint. I'm giving it a name. The column that will be used in customers is rep ID. That's the one that I just entered and added. Okay, and it is referencing our reps table and the employee ID column there. So the bottom line here is that you have to enter the reps first before you can add them to the customer table. So they have to exist before you add them to customer. So I'm going to go ahead and run this. Okay, and I'm going to refresh customers so you can see what that looks like. Okay, so you can see the foreign key is kind of hollowed, and your primary key is filled in, and they are actually pointing in different directions. You can also see keys by expanding this keys folder. So we're going to go ahead and move our closing comment down. We are not done entering our constraints yet. Our boss would like a constraint added to the department number column in our rep table. And we should only allow departments 1 through 6 because those are the departments that have sales reps. So we are already using test AP. So all we need to do is key in alter table reps. We're going to add a constraint. And this is going to be a check constraint. So we're going to name it check underscore department. Whoops. And this is a check constraint. And we've got the department number greater than or equal to 1 and department number less than or equal to 6. Okay, so it's a constraint on department number. When they enter values into the rep table for department number, this will ensure that the numbers are between 1 and 6. Okay, so I've gone ahead and I've run this and it completed successfully. I'm going to go ahead and move the closing comment down. Now, if you look on reps over here and you look under constraints, you can see the constraints that we have named and created. Okay, so here's our check departments constraint. And we still have another one that we are going to be running here. Our boss wanted a constraint added to the state column in our customer table to only allow customers from Illinois. So we are using test AP already, so we don't need to key that in. And right now, if we did a select on our current customer table, and I'll just do that to show you, we have a little problem with this new constraint because we currently have people in the table that violate our constraint. We have customers from all over the place, not just Illinois. So before we can add this constraint, what we're going to do is create a brand new table, and we're going to call it Illinois customers. And then we're going to apply the constraint to the Illinois customer table because we can't very well apply it to the current one. Okay, we have all sorts of different states in there. So to create a new table from an existing one, we are going to select everything. So the asterisk is correct, but we need to select into our new table. And our new table is Illinois customers. And the data is coming from the regular customer table. And I'm going to get rid of the semicolon because I do need a where clause. And this is where state is equal to Illinois. So what it's going to do is it's going to go through row by row, pull the Illinois customers, and throw them into their own special table. So we'll go ahead and execute. Okay, it looks like there's 3 of them. So I'm going to move my closing comment down. And now I can add the constraint. So this constraint is going to be on our Illinois customer table. And it is going to be similar to the one that we did for rep. So I'm going to go ahead and copy that, paste it down here. I'm going to change the name of the table to Illinois customer. And so we're going to call this thing, I'll just call it check state. We're adding a constraint, we're calling it check state, and what we're going to do in our check here is we're going to just make sure that state is equal to Illinois. And we're going to go ahead and run this. And in order to see this new table, we do need to refresh our database. And here's the Illinois customers. And if you expand out constraint, you can see check state. So at this point, you are done with the chapter textbook assignment.